2018 meeting of the Concord City Planning Board. We will seat Kira Delsino for Matt Hicks. Thank you.
Welcome.
And we do have a quorum. So, Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Sure. Chairman Woodfin.
Here.
Councilor Champlin.
Here.
Member Smithmeyer. Here. Member Regan.
Here.
Member Rosenberger.
Here.
Who did I miss? Member Delsino. Here.
Member Fox.
Oh, and Member Fox. I'm sorry.
You can forget me.
I apologize.
Sure, obviously already has.
I know.
Yeah, I feel good about that.
So we do have a quorum. We'll move
Made my
forward.
evening. Thank you.
We'll take a motion to approve the minutes unless anybody would like to make any changes to the minutes as presented.
Move approval. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We got a quick announcement here. The sign application for the works has been removed from the consent agenda. You'll see that, the board will see that underneath the consent. I think it's item 7A. And Warren Street Architects ADR application removed from consent, and that is item 7B. We'll address those independently. We have a determination of completeness by consent. Is that Plastics and Concord Hospital?
Correct.
Motion to approve both items and set public hearing for March 21st. So let me back up on my agenda here. Hang on just a second. So is that under the determination of completeness by consent?
Correct.
So you want me to address that separately? Where is that?
Number item 5, right here.
Let's see that. Oh, Advantage Plastics. Okay. So there's two items under 5, determination of completeness by consent. So we can do 5A and 5B under consent. Is anybody that would like to pull one of those items from the consent agenda from the board? Anybody? Or from the audience? Anybody? So we'll address both of those determination of completenesses by consent. If we could just quickly read those into the record, Heather. I don't think you need to read the whole thing, but 5A and 5B.
5A is Advantage Plastics requesting major site plan approval for a 10,100 square foot building addition and associated site improvements at 38 Henniker Street in the Industrial District. And 5B is Concord Hospital requesting major site plan approval to construct a new 4-story, 146,300 square foot ambulatory health care building and associated site improvements at 250 Pleasant Street in the Institutional District.
And any staff comments as far as completeness? They've been determined complete?
No.
And so we can open the public hearing or set the public hearing for March 21st. So we'll take a motion to approve that determination of completeness by consent.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and that will be set for the March 21st meeting. Sorry, that's a little different than we usually do. So now, design review applications by consent. So anybody in the audience that would like to address item 6A, which is Amish Homestead on behalf of Harry Shapiro and Sons for ADR approval, Dan O'Brien Kia, Seagloss Nail Bar. Anybody that would like to speak in opposition of any of those three items, just please.
Chairman?
Yes.
Just as a note, and I'll take your advice on this. Paul Maggiato owns Amish Homestead, and he's a very close personal friend of mine. Should I recuse myself
I'll defer.
and step down?
Since it's consent, I don't think there's a need to recuse yourself, but
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary, but if
you don't have any,
comfortable
you don't
doing
have
it,
any
then take-
financial, you don't have any financial
Right.
connections with
No, I
that.
just left him, and he told me to vote for him.
Okay, but you're not getting paid, you're not getting paid to do
Well,
that.
now you have to
Now
recuse.
you'll recuse, now we'll take your recusal, so just for the record, David Fox is
I'm not an
recusing
attorney,
himself from the consent vote for the signs. We still maintain a quorum, so we can still approve those.
Mr. Chairman, he can just recuse himself from that one.
He can,
Yes.
yes, yeah. Well, we can do it all by consent.
Yes.
Unless anybody in the audience would like to pull one of those items. See, no, we'll address all those by consent. Would anybody in the board like to pull any of those items from the consent agenda? If not, we'll take a motion to accept those as approved with ADR recommendations.
I move approval of the design review applications consent calendars.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll recognize that Mr. Fox is back in the hunt and can come back. Hey, it's pretty good, huh?
Thank you.
It was quick.
It was quick. Well, is back on good standings. So we'll move to item 7, which is items been removed from consent. The Works Bakery, on behalf of Siborowski Associates, requesting ADR approval to replace an existing externally illuminated wall sign at 42 North Main Street in the Central Performance District. Is the applicant here?
Yes, sir.
Come on up, sir. So this has been removed from consent. I believe maybe staff removed it from consent?
It was agreed at the ADR review.
Okay. Can we get a quick update on the ADR thoughts regarding this? I know I read a lot of it. It was an extensive conversation regarding placement and thoughts that ADR had regarding where this sign should go. So my understanding, and I'll let you speak to it, but my understanding is there's a rebranding going forward as far as the Works goes, and this is a corporate brand, and that's the purpose for the sign change, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Can we give a summary?
Yeah, if you could give us a quick summary, Heather.
So the discussion revolved around the proportions of the sign in relation to the granite band. Several members felt that the granite band is where the sign should go, and it sort of violated some of the architectural integrity of the granite band by sticking above it or going below it. Several members felt that the sign should in its entirety fit in the granite band, and other members felt that, or conversely, it could fit within the area of the windows, but not sort of traverse both architectural features. It was also discussed to sort of shift the sign down so that the top of the sign is in line with the granite band and the top of the Works piece was in line with the bottom of the granite band. And so the recommendation from ADR was that he return with a new design to be reviewed by ADR. The applicant obviously would prefer not to have to return and would try to address some of these issues tonight. Several members were not in favor of that, of the just shifting and aligning as a solution, and others were okay with that. So there wasn't an agreement on ADR about what it should be, and so that's why the applicant's here tonight, and he has made some modifications. In conversation with me, I took some of the suggestions that some members were okay with, and we worked on that, and he came up with a design that he's brought here tonight that he will go ahead and pass out. Is that a fair summary, you think?
Very. Do
Okay.
so now?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. I brought 10 copies. I hope that's enough. I don't know who would get them. but
Wait,
this-
why don't you start right over here, and you can work your way around that way.
Okay. So this was the original submittal that went in front of the architectural design. This is the new one.
We can share.
And I'll just walk you through what changes we made and why based on the recommendations, okay?
We
So-
can share.
Okay, so original, new.
I think we already have the original.
Okay.
we have the
Yeah, we have the original.
New.
We need, may I have a new, please?
Whoops.
Yep.
New.
Original. new.
Oh, great,
This is new.
That's new, here's original. You were there? Is that the
Is this new?
original?
It's okay, I have the new.
Original.
I can just look on this.
And so what I heard from the Architectural Design Review Board.
We'll just have you sit back down so they can get you on mic. Thank you. We don't want you too close.
Okay, great.
I just need to get your name for the record as well, sorry.
Richard French.
Okay, and-
One each.
okay, go ahead, sorry.
So what I heard from the Architectural Design Review is our original submittal did not take into account the architectural elements of the building, which Heather had mentioned. You can see our original one went above the granite lintel, and the bottom of the sign was not lining up with any of the other architectural elements that they mentioned, which are the 2/2 window transoms. And so what we've done in the submittal in front of you tonight is change the overall size of the sign. It's a little bit squattier than the original one, still staying within the 23 square feet allowed based on our frontage. We're mounting it at the top of the 2-foot lintel, which I believe was one of the recommendations from the Architectural Design Review. We are doing our best to pick up the bottom of the first set of windows, that transom where the 2/2 comes into account. We've changed the background behind the carved food to pick up the color of the gold columns. Again, that is just trying to pick up more of the architectural elements that we were encouraged to do so. And that pretty much is a quick summary.
Okay, so, and I think everybody's familiar with the area and probably familiar with the sign. The sign is pointed out now. What's the elevation view of this? If I was standing on the side of the building, it looks like the Works Cafe piece of it is rounded and pushed out, and then the items on the top are off from the wall. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct, and I have a more detailed of that if you'd all would like to see it.
Please. Yeah.
Okay.
Making you work.
That's all right. That's why I'm here.
Yes,
Is the
Susan.
steam like freestanding?
The steam is not
Does it-
freestanding, it's mounted.
It's, what's behind, I mean,
Freestanding,
no, but is this
Yeah.
a clear?
No, it's all cut out, so it's pushed off of the base, I believe.
No, I'm just trying to figure out,
Where is it?
on the original one, there's nothing here,
No back.
and then on this one, there's like,
so, great question. Let me back up, I know you want me on my, sorry about that, I'll answer that question. The original one, and we only realized this after the fact, let me get back to the mic. Which we pulled off Google Maps, showed that upper length, I'll call it a sill under the windows, looking as brick. We didn't even realize that when we submitted. There is a additional granite sill on the building that was not
That's
appropriately
okay,
depicted or in the first round,
okay.
right? So,
So that's there now?
that is there now. Yep, and we didn't even realize that, so we were really, really, really looking closely and trying to do the other comment that the Architectural Design Review Board said is that our sign was in 2D and really it's in 3D, and that we weren't doing a great job showing that,
Right.
which we are trying to do a much better job this time around. So,
Yeah.
so that you see the radius comes out 8 inches, the art. That was your question, Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
You see the construction of the material, it's salvaged wood, hand-carved, and the radius is salvaged metal. That being the red band behind the works.
Okay, so the food pieces of it and the steam pieces of it, are those also steel?
No, those are technically, well, the food pieces are carved foam that are then painted.
Okay.
It's a sign foam.
Yep.
And the steam, I'm not 100% certain of its makeup. I think it's thin, metal-looking material. I didn't do a great job describing that, but.
But it's like, it's kind of attached to the sign, but you can see through, I mean, it's like, you can see through it, so it looks like it's floating, even though it's.
Correct.
I think this is a way better solution, personally.
Thanks, we worked hard on it. This is probably the 6th version since design, architectural design last week. So I believe we took it seriously, our marching orders, and did our best, and Heather was extremely helpful in keeping us focused.
Question for staff.
Yes, Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for staff. Does this conform to the proportions that we established for signs in the new downtown in the design guidelines?
Yeah, we didn't, as long as it complies with code, we didn't specifically for building signs suggest anything different than what was already permitted
Okay.
for building signs.
So this is consistent with what is already there?
Correct.
Which, by the way, I'll miss because I think it's one of the more unique signs in downtown.
I agree.
It is-
As nice as this sign is.
It is one of the pictures in
I
the
know,
design.
that's why I asked it, because it also is shown in our new downtown design guidelines. So, thank you.
So I see 48 by 68 inches wide by 48 inches tall. On another one, I saw 76 by 43.
That was on the original
So the original.
submitted.
Okay.
We had to change it to work within the architectural elements. We had to, I don't have a great word, but we had to make the sign squattier.
Compress it.
Exactly, yeah, thanks.
So we're still under, we're okay with zoning as far as that goes, as far as the space goes. Now, on something like that, do they consider that back panel part of the coverage? They must, even though it's two separate pieces, yeah, no, okay. Okay, any member of the audience wish to address this sign application? No? Any member of the board? Teresa?
What?
Oh, sorry. Thought you had-
Point of order.
Okay. What? So again, staff recommendations or comments regarding the changes they've made with the intent of ADR's thoughts on the issues and the problems that they had with it. It seems to be a marked improvement. I guess maybe the visuals are better, which does help.
Well, as I said, ADR was not unanimous in its decision. So a few members thought a solution similar to what he came up with would be sufficient, and other members did not. So the people who would accept, other members wanted him to return.
Yeah, I think, just for the record, I think the change from the brick above the lintel there, or the whatever it might be below the sill, is a huge difference. That ties everything in to me, and I think somebody said before that it looks good. If anybody would like to make a motion to grant approval of this sign as submitted,
So moved.
we'll take that motion. And anybody like to second that?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You're all set.
Thank you. Concord's memorabilia. I'm
There
not
you go,
really-
there you go. We're still going to use it in our guide, so just so you know.
I think you should, I think that the work should donate it to the New Hampshire Historical Society, and they'll shoot me for saying that.
If you know somebody that would like it, we'd love it. We have a couple of them.
I'll find out.
Let me know, or let Heather know, please.
All right.
Okay, item 7B on the agenda is Warren Street Architects on behalf of Merrimack County Task Force Against Domestic Violence, Crisis Center of New Hampshire, requesting ADR approval for exterior building modifications, including a new ADA access and modifications to the building facade at 4 Blake Street in the Civic Performance District. I'm doing the whole job here, reading it into the record.
Doing a good job.
Is the applicant here?
He's not.
He's not, okay. This was pulled from consent for any particular
It
reason?
wasn't necessarily pulled from consent, but we had decided that we wanted to have public hearings for the architectural design review applications that were building permits and performance
Yep.
districts.
So this, if you look at the drawings on this, it's a unique entryway change to make this building ADA accessible. If you look on page 2 of the drawings, you see an elevation view. Front is on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is this significant change where in the bottom part of that right space, they're putting in an ADA accessible, is that a ramp or is that a little
like an
elevator?
It's an elevator.
It's an elevator. So a little elevator. So it's hidden from street view, pushed off to the side. I didn't have any issues with it when we first looked at it, and again, it's it's triggering some issues for site plan, so that's the reason you're seeing it here. But if anybody from the audience would like to speak to this or against this, no? Any?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm having, so as I'm looking at the porch, it's that block that's to the left of the porch.
It's to the left.
And is it set in?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
So they're taking up some of the porch to the front of the window to put the elevator unit in. So you come around in front, I think there's even some shrubs, it might even be shrubs there that obstruct some of that. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't think there's a walkway there.
There's a walkway there?
Mhm.
Okay.
And there's nothing like in the back? There's no porch or anything on the side of the, isn't there parking along the side?
Yep.
To the right? I'm just wondering if there was like a place that wasn't so obvious, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you would really even see it unless you were standing sort of on the side of the house.
Right.
It's tight.
No, I mean, it's really, I mean,
It's
right.
a tight spot.
No, I was just, walk by that all the time. I was just wondering if there was
Yep.
a back entrance where they could put it in, but, I mean,
So
that's a
here's
good solution, because it's kind of set out.
Here's the drawing, or here's a photo of the street view.
That one is not. Right. Oh, yeah, there's no room there, because there's an alley there. Yeah.
So they're doing some significant work, interior and exterior renovations to this building for the women's shelter, including ADA accessibility, new windows. Yes, sir. Speak
Thank you,
right
sir.
up, sorry.
No, that's quite all right. I needed to exercise my arm. Question for staff, do we know what the, is there going to be a new siding? Do we know what the composition of the siding
I
is?
believe they're gonna,
So they're going to have to get
Exciting new roof.
yeah, I'd have to check the minutes, but they are gonna do, the shingles are coming down and something like, I cannot recall,
windows as
probably
well.
vinyl. I wish that Jonathan had come because it's actually a pretty exciting project. It's a nonprofit organization that did, all these contractors, local contractors, like 20 or something, are doing all this work pro bono. They're each picking a room, and they're going to increase the capacity of the building and double it. And so, yeah, the whole place is getting a complete makeover.
I'm really pleased about the project. I think it is exciting, and it's a worthy and a project. I'm just concerned about more vinyl siding.
More vinyl
I think it
siding,
might
yep.
be, I'd have to look through the minutes to see.
That's
if
okay.
I
You
can
don't need to
find
answer me
it.
right now, but
I'm looking right now, Heather.
There's a house a couple of doors down has, they look like shakes, but I think they're like a concrete.
Yep.
And it's very attractive,
Mhm.
but it kind of replicates the shingle and not the
Yeah.
clapboard.
Right.
So I don't know what they're using. I think what we should do is say something though about the parking, since that's going to be, if they park in the front like that, that elevator will be inaccessible to anybody who really needs it.
So you're not really able to see it because I think this image didn't get scanned, but there's actually a walkway there in front
I
of.
think there's a space in front of the cars.
Well, no, but I'm thinking, if you're handicapped and you're parking on the street, and those
Oh, you're not
cars-
going to be able to get in there, I got
You
you.
will not be
Yep.
able to get into the elevator, so it might be that,
What's on the side? What's over to the left of the building?
that's the hospital.
No, the other side. The
There's-
other left.
They've got, it looks like there's 2 cars parked head-in on that side, and then there is some parking on the street, but it's somewhat limited. I don't know, it might be, I guess in the site, they should kind of look at that as how accessible is it? Because I think someone, if they needed the elevator,
Yeah.
would be hard-pressed to access it with that one car there.
And that was brought up at ADR as well, and,
Well, no, but the people, no, but if that car was there and that car was there, you wouldn't be able to get into it.
that was brought up at ADR as well, and they did look at it and consider it, and it was sort of like, well, this is the space that we have, and we can't necessarily eliminate the parking spaces, but we'll deal with it when we.
They could actually get rid of that one space. and
No,
park
but
on
I
the street.
think the photo that we're looking at here, if you look at the front of these cars, there's a walk in front of those cars, and I think if you can come around to the left and go up the walk, I think it's a free show. So there's a walkway in front of the building right here that's shown on these plans here. So here's the elevator, here's the front porch, the cars pull into here, the walkway goes across the whole front to over here.
The cars aren't literally parked.
The cars aren't
in
literally
the
parked in the
walkway.
walkway.
So the walkway is against the foundation.
It's
Right.
up against the house.
Right, but so how does the person who is in the walker or
You'd
the
go out in the
wheelchair
street and out.
has to go in the street?
You'd
They would go around.
Yeah, you'd go in this way.
In the other person's.
In
I
and
mean,
through that way.
You guys can deal with
Yep,
it, but I
yep.
think that's a little bit of an issue, because since they're making this effort to make it handicapped accessible,
Or they make this a handicap accessible spot.
Yeah.
there you go, something.
That will do it.
I think that's what they're doing.
I think they did mention that they were going to do that, but.
Okay, so we'll take that as a note,
I'm not
and
sure.
I think maybe even make a note on the on the material.
approval.
Let's say, hey, we'd love to see something other than just vinyl siding.
my concern is that vinyl siding ends up being the first thing that people think of when
Yeah.
there might be some cost-effective alternatives.
Sure.
That. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I have that plan back? It's not, I gotta give everything back. Okay, so any other concerns or issues with this application? If not, we'll entertain a motion to grant that approval as outlined.
Move approval.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
I made a late aye. Mr. Chairman.
Aye. I heard you.
Thank you.
All right, that moves us on to Section 8. If you could read 8A into the record, Madam Clerk.
Foxfire Property Management Incorporated, on behalf of 2 Pillsbury Street LLC, requesting minor subdivision approval to adjust the lot lines between existing condominium units at 2 Pillsbury Street in the institutional district. And maybe staff could give a little summary of the actions that we're actually.
Please do, come on up. It's not that we don't like to see you, but it's becoming a habit. If we could just get the staff update on this project, that would be great.
So there's 2 components to this right now. On December 20th, the planning board approved the transfer of 355 square feet from Unit 3C to Unit 3B. And the applicant has informed us that the request was actually to transfer 355 square feet from Unit 3B into Unit 3C on the 3rd floor. So we're asking that the board revisit that decision and clarify that. And then as a part of that original application, the applicant had requested that 4,068 square feet of the currently merged section of the 5th floor between Units 5A, 5B, and 5C be consolidated into Unit 5B. That had been continued from December to January and then January to this meeting. And so the applicant would like you to act upon that request at this meeting. So you'll have that as a separate approval request.
Okay, anything else from staff on that?
Everything else is pretty straightforward.
Okay, anything else you'd like to add?
No, hopefully it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, so we've got, Heather, can you help me out here? So we've got to revisit the decision on a minor subdivision approval from last month or from December? December. So revisiting the decision for minor subdivision plan approval to transfer 355 square feet of Unit 3C to Unit 3B. Is that a separate item that we should take under?
Yep, I would
motion and grant?
basically
Bless
just
you, bless you.
make a motion to amend the decision to specify that the transfer is from Unit 3C to 3B.
Okay, so what Heather said, if someone would like to make a motion to
Wait,
grant
hold on,
that
hold on.
approval. Whoops. No, I want,
I wrote that so that you would revisit the original decision, and then below that, the proper one is in there. So I want to make sure that's clear, that it's actually, if you're going to clarify it, then just clarify Unit 3B to Unit 3C instead of 3C to 3B. Sorry.
3B to 3C?
3B
So
to
we did
3C.
3C to 3B, and you're saying it should be 3B to 3C?
Right, and that's how I'd written it, is that you would
Okay, so
revisit it. And
Heather read it wrong.
Heather paraphrased it wrong.
So the minutes will reflect that the correct information, right, Lisa?
Correct.
That
Of course.
we're changing from 3B to 3C, and I think we took a motion, so we'll take that motion again if someone would like to make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the transfer of 355 square feet from Unit 3B into Unit 3C on the 3rd floor of 2 Pillsbury Street.
Yep. Motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That brings us to 3.2, which is the grant minor subdivision plan approval to oh, is that?
Go to 3.3.
3.3. Grant minor subdivision plan approval to consolidate 4,068 square feet of units 5A, 5B, and 5C into Unit 5B for property at 2 Pillsbury Street, subject to precedent conditions noted below, and those precedent conditions are outlined in A 1 through 6. No subsequent conditions. Anybody like to question or comment on that, or we'll take a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined?
Move approval. Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Fox, was that you
Yes.
that moved?
That
Thank you.
motion carries. And I think that's it. So we all done
I think we're done for a while.
with 2 Pillsbury Street? We're not going to see you again? It's been a pleasure, but.
Thank you, guys.
You want to
Okay.
double check that 5th floor move?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you sign in on the sheet?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Please, I should have asked that before. All right, so that moves us on to item 8B on our agenda. If you could read that into the record, Madam Clerk.
Item 8B is Keelan Enterprises on behalf of Benjamin, Lisa, and Linda Stevenson, requesting minor subdivision approval for a 3-lot subdivision at 32 Talent Road in the open space residential district.
Okay, is the applicant here? Come on up. Maybe a quick update from staff while we are getting situated.
Yeah, this is a 3-lot minor subdivision. The applicant is creating 2 new single-family house lots from an existing 193.1 acre single-family house lot at 32 Talent Road.
Okay. Any concerns or issues that we should be aware of? I know there was some discussion regarding the layout and the plans. Well, why don't you tell us about the project, and I'll see what I can find from my notes.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. The subdivision, it's a 3-lot subdivision. It's a total of 19 acres. The remainder is going to become 14.2, and then we're looking at 2 new lots. One's 2 acres, the other one's 2.9. And I think the concern is, as far as the configuration, that's come up a couple times, and we discussed it. The family that owns this wants to build a house for their mother that currently lives in Canterbury, and she's really set on the house lot configuration that's shown as 123-2-4-1. They want to be able to, for her to be able to walk to their driveway, to their house conveniently. And so that's why that lot ended up where it did. And as part of the development, to make it all work, construction-wise, they needed to at least sell one of the lots, so that's why 123-2-4-2 was created. That will be on the market hopefully soon. Other than that, the lots are pretty straightforward. We did review your regulations. We showed the steep slopes. We showed the wetlands. We showed a 10,000 square foot square on each of the lots to show that we met your lot size requirements. On the table up above, we show the buildable land areas of each of the lots. We also show the usable land areas as well. And there's place for a well and septic systems. And if we get approval tonight, the only thing that we're left with to do is state approval. So we would recommend that as a condition.
Okay. Further comments from staff?
Well, the applicant's done a good job of addressing our planning comments, and we have a revised plan that does show the usable rectangle. You guys weren't given that one, but
Right.
you guys to me, and I have it.
As soon as he said it, I remembered that was the issue when I was reviewing it, was the usable rectangle. So thank you, John.
We definitely have it now, so we're happy with it.
Great. Any questions from the board regarding this application? Yep.
I just want, for the board's information, to let them know a little bit of the context of this and the history of this. They originally gave us applications for 5 lots, which triggered the cluster subdivision, and then we got another application, I'm not sure, but they were triggering the cluster subdivision. And then we got this application for 3, which is minor, which did not trigger the cluster. The other thing that we were asking for was if they were going to trigger the major, which would have been 4 or 5 lots for road improvements. Just so you know, in looking at this, that we asked for the condition that they put notes on the plan, which they have done, that if the lot is further subdivided, that it would trigger the cluster ordinance, because it looks as though it's ready to.
Right. And that becomes an ongoing challenge on our end, and it's something that you guys have been very good at, and we're going to hold people accountable for it. So it's something we've kind of put people on notice and said you can't come one year and then turn around and come back a year or two later and subdivide the rest of it. So we'll have a note on the plan to that regard, correct? So if additional further subdivision is done, it triggers all of the things that would have done with
subdivision
the 5
and potentially the intersection improvements.
Thank you. That was a question that I
Yes.
had. This is a very interesting piece of property with all of the height, the elevations and everything.
I know it. Okay, any member of the audience wish to address this application? Yes, come on up. Could you step back, sir? Thank you. And you signed in, right? Did you sign in? We'll have you do it when you come back up. We'll have you back up in a sec.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm in a butter. My name is Jennifer Boffinger. I live across the street. I hadn't had a chance to look at the plan. I'm just there, and I saw when the property was cut, and I knew what was coming, and it's kind of discouraging if you live anywhere in Concord where it's been rural for a long time, and then all of a sudden you think you get neighbors that are coming in that have kind of the same values you do, you know, about forest and open land, and all of a sudden all these houses are going in. That's beside the point because I know there are rules and regulations and you're allowed to do what you're allowed to do if you have enough land. My concern is that, my concern is that there are going to be 3 giant new houses on the road, but the road itself, not sure if, it's not a state road, right? It's a town road.
City road.
Has anyone been on Talent Road recently? No. If you don't have 4-wheel drive, don't even try it. It's a disaster all the time. And so my concern is that with the additional impact of more driving cars on the road, that the road will just be worse. And if my lack of understanding of whether it's a cluster subdivision that triggers road improvements or not, I'm not sure. It's a question I have as to whether the road has to have anything done to it in order to get, to be allowed. Does the road have to have any kind of, will the road stay as it is with 3 new homes on it?
Yes, it will.
It will.
Yep.
I encourage you all to take a drive up Talent Road sometime and take a look at it before it changes too much. But that's really all I have.
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
It's, so it's 2 new homes? There's one that's existing? And so
No,
it's,
there are three houses that are going to go in.
well, one is existing. It says existing home on the large lot. I think that's an existing home. And so it will be 3 lots total, but the one is existing, and so it's 2 new homes.
And the one in the middle is what they're leaving open that won't have a home on it at this time?
Correct.
Okay, so sorry, two additional homes.
And we do, Brian, do you want to address this? Because we did discuss the road pretty in depth.
Oh, good.
And I've actually been on that road recently. I'm with the engineering department. One of the reasons we have the limit to the minor subdivision and minimizing the lots is because of the road and particularly the intersection of Hoyt Road and some challenges with getting larger vehicles in there, emergency vehicles and things.
Yeah.
So that's why there's some notes on the plan. It is one of the only gravel roads in Concord, so it does have maintenance that's needed on a periodic basis. So at times of the year, such as now, when things get warmer and freeze, it does get harder to traverse. But
Yeah.
As far as the road improvements, it would need to be more substantial development that would trigger the necessity to pave that road or to fix the intersection.
Okay. That's all I had. I just wanted to say hi and speak up.
Say hi. Thank you very much.
More
Could I get
people
you
would drop by
to
and
sign
say
in?
hi.
Thank you very much. Get you to sign in. And you are at 41 Talent Road, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And is that just on the, if you're going up, you'll be on the left-hand side?
Yeah, I'm the third on the
Almost
left.
to Canterbury?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm trying to get my bearings, sorry.
Yeah, it's a really nice area, and you should get out there sometime.
With 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, in the spring, or maybe in the summer when it's nice and dry and flat, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, any other member of the audience wish to address this application? Seeing on the audience, so we'll have you come back up, sir. And I should have asked you to state your name for the record if we could.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I usually do that too. Alden Boschman from Keyland Enterprises. I'm a private land consultant, septic designer, wetland scientist in the state of New Hampshire.
Great, thank you. Okay, any members of the board wish to bring forth anything, ask any questions? Staff, follow-up, anything? So concerns on the road, you heard the concerns on the road. And again, I don't think it's incumbent on you as a developer, but again, we'll certainly note that regarding any other future development that'll push things forward on this particular road. Let me step back off the plan here. Hold on a second. So what do we have as part of this? Okay. So in our packet, we've got 3.1 is to grant the minor subdivision approval for the subdivision subject to following conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year and prior to endorsement of the final plans by the planning board chair and clerk. Outlined there in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Anything else? Is that the only thing that's needed, Heather?
Yes.
That is the only thing. So if anybody would like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval as outlined in your packet on 3.1, we'll entertain that motion.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You're all set. Thank
Thank
you.
you
And
ver-
thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to go to amendments and other items. Already, item 9?
Correct.
Let's read item 9A into the record if we could, Madam Clerk. It's a long one, so I'm going to let you read.
let's
I'm
make-
going to let
let's
you
make
read it
Beth-
into the record.
let's
Let's
make
leave
Beth
Beth read it into the record.
It's a proposed zoning ordinance amendment to section 2824, allowable principal and accessory uses in zoning districts. Paragraph J, table of principal uses, by amending use number C5, privately owned outdoor recreation facility, including golf course, tennis course, or swimming pool. Use number C7, campground and youth camps, and use number G3, bed and breakfast, to expand the allowable uses by conditional use permit in the residential open space and medium density residential districts. Also amending section 28513, campgrounds and youth camps, to include standards for outdoor recreational facilities, and the glossary by adding a definition for outdoor recreational facilities.
Holy cow, that is a lot. A lot. So we've got in our packet, we've got the background information, the analysis of the impacts, and the recommendation by staff. Anything further is regarding the recommendation, because it looks like everything's just repeated there. I don't know if there's any, what exactly are we looking at in layman's terms, if we could kind of break it down. So obviously, a city council to amend the zoning ordinance, as you outlined so eloquently in your reading it of the record, but what are we actually doing here?
I'm going to turn it over to Beth to give a summary of her report and explain why we're doing this.
Sure. I'm also going to pass out some updates since that was posted last week to the ordinance, and then a letter that was submitted today for somebody that couldn't make it tonight. So the purpose of this amendment to the zoning ordinance is to address agritourism, which I don't know if people have been following in the news. It's been a hot topic the past couple of years. The RSA's added agritourism to the definition of agriculture with allowing it as a use for marketing for the farms. And it's sort of a broad term that it hasn't been defined, but it does allow for municipalities to regulate it. So given what occurred in Henniker recently is sort of the more recent that's gone back and forth through appeals. I think it's in the Supreme Court now. Just briefly, for anybody that doesn't know, it's a Christmas tree farm in Henniker that was hosting weddings. And the argument is that weddings they're enjoying the farm, so they're considered marketing for the farm. But the town didn't have anything in its regulations regulating it. So that's sort of the argument of there was no way to regulate these events that were occurring. And there was impacts to the roads and the neighbors. So that's sort of where we're coming from, trying to establish some regulations for events that don't historically fall under what is considered marketing for farms, like apple picking, hay rides, corn mazes. And by doing this, we don't want to impact the historic marketing activities that are occurring at Carter Hill or Apple Hill Orchard. So by updating the ordinance the way it was Heather just read through, that addresses the different agritourism uses, such as overnight stays, which we'll say falls under bed and breakfast. So that's why we're expanding those uses into the districts where agriculture is a permitted use. So we're expanding these uses into the districts, the RO and the RM. Those are the two districts where agriculture is permitted by right. And those are the rural open space districts. And
Question.
yes.
I've been following that in the paper because
Okay.
it's been front page for quite a while. If the court finds that the agri-marketing thing that the wedding deal going on out there, if the court finds against the farmer, the tree farmer, does that create any issues for how we would deal with our issue here, or are we preempting
that problem?
We're preempting that by doing this.
Okay.
So we
It
are.
won't be a statewide kind of.
No. So our solution is to expand the uses and do it through a conditional use permit process so that we're not trying to restrict it, we're not trying to stop it from happening, but this allows it to go before the planning board and give neighbors the opportunity to testify if they have concerns. It allows planning board to impose restrictions, say, for addressing like the noise ordinance, you can limit the hours of operations or the number of events that occur. So these are for the more, bed and breakfast obviously is not going to be, I think, a very disruptive to neighborhoods, but I think larger weddings or outdoor concerts, things that attract more people on a regular basis, I think will be a little, it'll be a good process to sort of start to regulate that within these districts. And another reason that we're doing it this way, instead of defining it as agritourism in our ordinance, is it allows other open space properties that aren't currently operating as agricultural properties to also do these events. So if you had a 20-acre parcel that you're not farming, but you have this opportunity to host weddings out there, this sort of allows, this amendment will allow that to occur. So it expands rural enterprise, so it encourages more economic development in the rural districts of the city.
So, and I read some of the articles as well in the paper, and if I'm not mistaken, the state is going to address it with an overarching RSA. Is that the example they gave was they want to have it looked at the state level because they don't want one town deciding that things can be done in their town and then the next town over can do things and it's not done. So are we getting in front of that in what we're doing here, or is it not going to address that? Is it not going to address that? Bring Craig up?
I'm going to invite Craig up.
Can we put Craig on the spot?
Yep.
Craig. So, and I read the same articles, David, I think that you probably did in the newspaper. So it mentioned specifically the state wanted to address this and kind of get in front of it as well. So,
But in that case, though, just quickly, in that case, if the state found against that particular guy and we've passed our thing,
right.
What happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a question for not you and me, but city solicitor's office.
Or the zoning.
Or the zoning. So let's welcome to the esteemed audience, Mr. Craig Walker. If you could state your name and give us your official position here.
Thank you for reminding me. I'm Craig Walker, zoning administrator. What we're trying to do here is to avoid the conflict with whatever happens with the state and the legislature. I've been following this for a number of years now. I've actually gone out to Henniker. I've met with the owner of that property. I've talked to him. It's a real back and forth confusing situation. And it's a stretch of a definition that goes beyond what the original definition was. So by doing this, whether or not the courts, in fact, I'm not sure it's still in the courts. I think they did rule in favor of the town of Henniker and against the gentleman that was fighting it. But there's also a bill before the legislature right now, too, which really broadens the definition of what agritourism is. I think that's stuck in committee at this point in time. So by doing this, we kind of define everything and give everybody the ability to do stuff and have it defined and not be challenged at a later date. And that's kind of what happened in Henniker. The gentleman was doing his business for many years. And he thought he was fine. And the town didn't say anything, but then they got challenged in court. And there really wasn't anything they could fall back on to defend their position. And it's, as you all know, if you've read the articles, it's been 5, 6, 7 years of court battles and a lot of money and a lot of time. So this defines it. This hopefully would settle any issues that come up.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Walker?
Just have a quick question. Seems like we're trying to address agritourism, but it's not really specific. I mean, it's sort of, I don't know if it's just a temporary kind of thing to fit it into what we have, but whether eventually it should be somewhat more specific to actually say this is what we intend.
That's the problem. The definition of agritourism is not well defined. And that's what's going back and forth currently in the legislature.
Right.
So what, and part of the problem is in the current RSA, it talks about uses traditionally accessory to agricultural uses. So an accessory use is something that should be subordinate and related to the agricultural use. But a bed and breakfast, if one was to argue, has no relationship to agricultural uses. Perhaps it's happened on farms for years, but you don't have to have a farm to have a bed and breakfast. So that's what we're calling these things principal uses, and if they're appropriate for the location, they will be able to do it.
So I think it's important that we did get a letter handed to us that was received today, I believe.
Yes.
So it's not part of the public record yet. It will be with the minutes, but should we read this into the record, or I'd like to just get your thoughts on it, Craig. I don't know if you have a copy of the letter.
I've read it, yes.
And this is a letter from Attorney Manzelli, who's representing Generation Farm regarding the proposed ordinance change that we're speaking of now. Her client, James and Marley Stever, is located at 44 Graham Road, which is up off of Hoyt Road, large farm that they run, Generation Farm. So Attorney Manzelli's I think, arguing here that she's not in favor of this ordinance change, but I'm not 100% sure why.
No,
She
is?
I think you're reading, yeah.
Yeah.
She was in support of it.
Yeah, she's not opposed to it. She has reservations as she is representing certain people with certain interests, but I don't think she's in opposition to this.
Okay.
I found it hard to.
I follow. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, so sorry. I thought there might have been some issues there regarding that. So any other discussions or comments? Yes, Kira?
Is there a definition of outdoor recreational facility?
It's in the proposed ordinance amendment here on the last page under section 4.
Okay, great.
And that was something that we did not previously have in the ordinance. It was only kind of listed in the table of principal uses, and now we've more clearly defined what outdoor recreational facilities would be.
So if the wedding was going to be inside, what category would that be?
Convention center, places of religious worship or something of that nature.
So if you had a barn and you wanted to do weddings in the barn?
If it was an existing barn, we put provisions in here that an existing structure such as a barn could be converted and used for that in the hopes of preserving some of these older, larger structures. If they wanted to use a tent, they could have a temporary tent on site. But you could not necessarily, without a variance, put up a brand new building, which would be essentially a conference center or something of that nature without.
But those aren't permitted in the residential district?
Correct.
So if you had a farm with a barn and wanted to have weddings in the barn, how would that get?
The existing barn would be permitted, and we have language in this ordinance that says that existing structures may be used for these activities.
Okay.
Just to clarify, what recourse do abutters have or neighbors have?
Well, again, it's going to be a conditional use permit.
Okay.
So it would be publicly notified, and they would have the opportunity to come before the board. We also put the provision in there, too, that the board may require a traffic study if they feel the need. I mean, again, not to go back to Henniker, but that is one of the issues. If you've ever driven up to that farm, it's a beautiful drive up a dirt lane, curvy road. So, people who buy property in a rural area have an expectation, I think, of peace and quiet. And, so we want to try to balance this out, allowing people to do things that are financially viable, but also protecting the rights of those who have made an investment in a peaceful lifestyle.
So thank you. Sorry, thank you, Brian. So the ordinance as we've written it protects us, but it still promotes the economic development and all the things that we want to promote. I'm still concerned, the Talent Road conversation that we just had, if the end of Talent Road had a nice big farm on it and 300 people could come up and go to a wedding, they're all going to park in the street there, every single weekend. So then what's the business aspect when they come before us? We would then say you're going to have to fix the roads, you're going to have on-site parking, but there's still going to be that traffic issue that is, I think, one of the primary issues in Henniker as well.
Right. This is where I throw Bryant under the road and say that engineering would probably, make a recommendation on something of that nature. As a commercial enterprise, though, they would be required to provide on-site parking. We would not want to see something like 300 cars.
Right.
Again, it is a non-residential activity. Our agricultural uses are actually non-residential activities. So if somebody was going to set something up and they had the potential of 300 people coming or 300 vehicles coming, they would have to provide some form of parking. It wouldn't have to necessarily be paved parking, and that's one of the things that we've looked at and discussed here. There is a provision in the ordinance that allows uses that operate less than 6 months out of the year to have alternative surfacing.
Good.
If you've been down to Apple Crest Farms down in Hampton, if you ever look at that place, it's in a very populated area, but it's a huge expanse of orchards, and they do all sorts of events and things over the year. There's a huge store there. But they probably have paved parking. I mean, the store is almost like a supermarket, but they probably have paved parking for maybe 100 vehicles. But they have 3 acres of grass parking out behind it. So on the weekends in the fall, when they have hundreds of people, maybe even thousands coming to that location, they can accommodate it. But it doesn't put in unnecessarily paved parking.
Paved parking.
So,
okay, perfect.
I have one question.
Teresa,
Maybe
yes.
I'm just not understanding this. But under your definition of outdoor recreational facilities, are farms included in that?
No, agriculture use is a whole separate use category.
Okay, all right, all right.
Karen.
So I'm still struggling with where in the table of principal uses an indoor barn type facility is a permitted use by conditional use in the residential zone. Can you point me to the right place?
I think okay, let me just see. Okay, under item 3, section 3, number B. Wait a minute, it's jumping here. Okay, so last page, up above section F, item number 4. That's where it says, buildings and structures existing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance may be used in conjunction with the outdoor recreational use. Temporary structures such as tents are permissible in compliance with life safety and fire requirements. So if there's a barn or something else that's existing at the time this ordinance is adopted.
But what if you don't have outdoor recreational use? What if you just have a barn and you just want to have a wedding in the barn?
You'd have to come for the variance on that.
And, so it would be a variance, it wouldn't be by...
Well, no, I take that back. Again, it's a barn that's existing on the site at the time. That structure could be used for a
But
wedding.
I'm looking at the table of uses and I'm not seeing it there. I guess that's where I need help finding...
Well, that's the table of uses on the far right-hand side under...
Because I'm looking at concert dance halls,
Right, so
all of that.
so number 5, privately owned outdoor recreational facilities refers you to section 28.5.13, which is the supplemental standards section. And what I just read to you under number 4 are the standards that apply then to that use.
But it says in conjunction with outdoor recreational use, and I'm just wondering if there's no outdoor recreational use at all. And you say you have a bed and breakfast and you want to host weddings in the barn. Would that fall under bed and breakfast? But what if you didn't have a bed and breakfast, you just had a barn, and every weekend you wanted to host a wedding?
Well, that's one we hadn't, a specific circumstance we really haven't talked about. I don't know. Again, the whole aspect is using the farm property for these types of events. Whether or not the wedding is inside a barn, Yeah.
I mean, you know, you have.
I would think it would fall into that category and it would be permitted because we are allowing the use of existing buildings. And the idea of, yeah,
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you on this. I can't
Yeah,
see
I
it.
didn't, I mean, if
can't
you
see
want to
it.
permit it, then you might want to find some way of adjusting.
Yeah, and maybe we can do that. I mean, if that's a concern, a clarification there, because I think that's, it's not something we are intending to prohibit with this. I mean, if somebody has an existing barn and they want to be using it in conjunction with that, I think I just kind of assumed if you're having a wedding in the barn, half the fun is having the reception and such outside. So I'm sorry, I never really thought about it that way.
We have a farm in Massachusetts, and it's a working farm, and there's a house, and there's this 3-story barn, but we don't do any outdoor recreation. This happens to be Mass, if we're here, but saying we don't do any outdoor recreation. It's a farm. But there's, to me, you want to be able, at least I think you want to be able to allow somebody, if they want it, have a wedding there. And they may even have the wedding in the house and the reception in the barn. They may not be outdoors, but I don't see in this that this allows it because of the way this definition is.
That's what I was wondering.
Okay, well, maybe we need to look at it a little more then and work on that. I mean, that was not something we were intentionally trying to exclude.
I didn't think you were, just the way it was written. I couldn't figure out where just a regular working farm that happened to have a barn, and somebody wanted to have a wedding, whether it was a family member or not, for.
Yeah, but that's a one-off, you're not talking one-off weddings, you're talking a wedding business.
Right.
Well, even if it's a wedding business.
But one-off,
yeah.
As a
one-off.
principal use, yes.
No,
That's
wedding
the thing. This is a
business.
commercial operation.
Let's have Heather.
I'm wondering if we just strike the last piece of that sentence and just say buildings and structures existing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance are permitted. Because
Because then you
you
could have
don't,
it in your house or your barn or your outbuilding or your
right, if there's
chicken coop, whatever it might be.
if there is a recreational use there, it's irrelevant. If they already have a building or structure, it's going to continue. And if there's not a recreational use there, it simply allows it to be permitted under that category.
So strike what part?
I'm suggesting that we just strike the section that said may be used in conjunction with the outdoor recreational use. So we just say buildings and structures existing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance are permitted.
But it's still under.
It still falls under outdoor recreation.
Yeah, this is true, but it sounds like the intention was to categorize a wedding in an existing building as an outdoor recreation use.
Right,
So it's
yes.
intended that it does fall under this category as an outdoor recreation use. That's what we would call it.
That's why I asked about the definition, and the definition says it's outside, not within a building, so that's what
But this
threw me.
section seems, maybe we change the definition to
Right,
just
that might do
moderate
the
that.
trick.
Because I think the intention is that we permit it under outdoor recreation in an existing structure, and whether or not there's an existing outdoor recreational use is kind of relevant to that point. It either already is there and they're using it or not, or it's not being used and that's why they want to do weddings there.
And
Or it's not
maybe-
being used as part of the recreation, and that's why they want to do the weddings there.
Well, it's being used as part of the event, and as I say, I guess in my mind, when I'm thinking of using a farm for a wedding, whether the wedding's being held inside the barn or being held out on the field, that was all part of the outdoor event activities, and that's the purpose of having a wedding at a farm, is to enjoy the environment and such. At least that's the argument. So I guess in my mind, I was kind of putting it all into the same category.
Till
there.
it rains.
Right.
Suzanne?
So you're including farms and outdoor recreational facilities?
No.
Agricultural activities is a completely separate use category on
Okay.
its own. It's been in the ordinance for
Okay, and
decades.
this change, though, includes farms as a place where they could hold events with a conditional use permit?
Yes, yeah. If there's a farm, whether or not it's a farm, if it's just open
Just
space
like
land,
yeah,
somebody
like a
has a nice
non-working
piece of
farm that
woods
used to
with
be
a
a
brook
farm,
running
doesn't
through
matter,
it, you know,
Right, okay.
they could do something like that there too, so, with a conditional use permit.
I would think you might then want to include some language in the outdoor recreation facilities, include but are not limited to.
Yeah.
When I read that, I mean, those are outdoor recreation activities, golf courses, driving ranges, swimming pools, et cetera. At least put something in there as a definition that would allow you to do this in outdoor, open space or on a farm. Because when I read it, I did not, farms did not seem to me they were in there.
Well, again, it's not intended strictly for a farm.
No, I know that,
Yeah.
I know that, but
We end up having multiple principal uses occurring. You have the farm as its own principal use, and then this is a second principal use going on at the property. They're two separate things.
So, Craig, so walk me through this. So I'm just trying to come up with uses that we could come up with some language. Somewhere in Concord on a little stream, there's a grist mill, and that grist mill has a storage building next to it that would be a perfect wedding environment. So you've got the building, the storage facility, and then outdoor, an outdoor recreational space. So that's the space. How does that conform to this piece? I want to hold weddings there, and I want to be within the law. Does this ordinance, as it's written, accommodate that?
Yes.
Okay.
In my belief.
Okay. Yes, Heather?
So, under the definition section, the very last line says open-air event facilities. That language, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that language, open-air event facilities, are supposed to cover things like weddings. And so this section is specifically written and amended to include things like weddings or receptions or things that you would have either in your yard in a tent or in a structure such as a barn. So I believe they didn't specifically propose like weddings or receptions, just because there may be other events that we haven't thought of. But it's really that language of open air event facilities that is intended to cover things like weddings and other
Family
types of
reunions,
receptions.
birthday parties, any
Concerts.
type of an open-air event of that nature.
the two of us still don't think it
Yeah,
works, but.
I mean, it starts recreational facilities that are operated as a business where the activities are not conducted within a building. So it just seems to exclude, if I have 20 acres with a house and a huge barn, I don't know that this covers me if no one is tromping around outside other than to get into the barn and out of the barn.
The problem is that if you don't include the language about the building, then recreational facility could be a bowling alley. It could be there are any number of things. It could be a movie theater. There are any number of things that involve major structural things they're intending to exclude things like that, like a bowling alley or a pool hall. You could do an indoor pool. You could create a giant, so it's intended to refer specifically to outdoor recreation that doesn't involve a structure. But so it's a challenge to exclude all of those things that would seriously not be appropriate in the district, but also to allow things. So that's why, yes, it says that are not conducted within a building. Maybe there's better language that we could come up with to clarify that are not. I don't know what it might be, that item, just that subsection 4 was intended to clarify that if there's accessory buildings, and we all know what those are, it's usually pretty clear what accessory building is, that can be used for the recreation, because it's obviously not the primary building where the bowling alley is, but maybe there's a shed or something. And then I think it should just say buildings and structures existing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance may be used for, open air event facilities, period. Somebody say something.
I'm thinking.
No, I think when we talked about it, if you were only doing this just for the barn, then it becomes an indoor use.
Yeah, an event.
The purpose of this was to address.
And it's not permitted.
Right. So the purpose of this is to address for the enjoyment of the rural area. So an indoor wedding can happen anywhere. That barn can be anywhere in the city, it doesn't matter. But if you're only having it in the barn because you have a barn, then that doesn't fall under this category. So we're addressing the having events on a property to take advantage of the rural character of the site, and that's how we're
It has to be
viewing it.
outdoor activities.
Right, and it,
That's different than what I thought. Okay.
right. So whether it's just you walking through the field to your car, to the barn with the barn doors open, that's sort of what we're trying to address here, is that you are taking advantage of the rural character of that site. If you're just shuttling people straight to that barn and that barn has been souped out to have events all year round, then that becomes, I think, a whole other venue, and that falls under a separate category with a more intensive use.
Thank you, Beth. Yep. She said it better than I did. You know, and as she was talking, I was thinking Peterborough Playhouse out in Peterborough, if you've ever been there. That would not fall into this category. That would be a completely different use. So.
But they still have stuff outside for Peterborough, right?
They have
Yeah,
tables
so,
outside
yeah.
and stuff like that, but the theater itself is all contained inside
Right.
the building and everything. So.
Okay, Suzanne?
The other piece is also, it becomes more of a commercial enterprise. It's not like a, once a summer for whatever. It's when you're really doing it as an enterprise, and that.
You're marketing it, you're promoting it. Every weekend, you might have something scheduled, just like it was a commercial facility, right?
So it's
That's what
almost
we're
like you're
looking
getting
at.
a permit.
It's not, the daughter getting married once
Right.
or something like that. That's, you were looking at it from a business perspective.
And that was the foundation of the issue.
That's
with the
exactly
Hennigan
right.
thing.
That's exactly right. It was a one-off thing, and then it became a two-off, and then it
Then,
became
yeah.
every week, and then it became, a whole seasonal thing, so it's happening all year round. And I think that's the issue.
Yeah, and that's why we have it by
Right.
conditional use permit,
Right.
so that each individual case can be reviewed.
So back to my question originally, that brought you up here originally, the state's overarching ability to dictate anything in this piece of it. Are they gonna come out with their own set of guidelines that are gonna override what? Obviously, they will override it if they adopt it, and then it's dependent on the cities to follow in lockstep.
Right, we always have the ability to, well, in certain cases, grant more restrictive. I think in this case, if the state came out with something that was permissive, we wouldn't be able to restrict it any more than the state allowed.
Now.
Right.
Right.
Or in the future, yeah.
Okay. Kira, did your questions get
I think so, yeah.
smoothed out
Yeah.
a little bit?
So you
Teresa?
have to have horseshoes if you want to have the wedding.
That's exactly right. That's
Or
exactly right.
cornhole.
We should put that in there.
And they got to be rusty from being outside.
Right.
Picnic tables.
And my question is there any reason we should wait 2 months to see what the state does?
Is there a benefit to us adopting this and putting it into place prior to the state's? I mean, it could be 6 months before the state does
No, it
anything.
won't be 6 months. They have to be finished by mid-May.
I don't know if there's any advantage necessarily, because again, this issue has been back and forth a number of years. There's been at least 3 or 4 proposed amendments. Some have been adopted, some have not, some have died in committee. I think for the benefit of the property owners in the city of Concord, knowing what they can and cannot do at this point would be beneficial to them.
Oh, I agree with
Yeah.
that. I was just saying the legislation that's up now will have to be voted up or down.
Yeah.
By May, and maybe by the end of March. So that was the only reason I was wondering if
I
it made
think
more
it's
sense.
floundering in committee right now, but.
I think,
Heather? No, David, go ahead.
my question is, do we preempt the state, or does the state preempt us?
No, the state preempts
And
us.
are we in a?
Yeah,
kind of
we may be, we putting the cart before the horse here, but if whatever we adopt could be overridden at the
Subject
state
to
level. I
whatever
mean, not
we
even
do.
subject to it. We might have it in place for 3 months, and then the state will come in with new guidelines, and there would be an effect.
I
at
guess
X
I
amount
would
of time.
agree with Teresa. Is there any reason why we would do it now?
I think there is.
Potentially?
I think there is. I think the time is right in the sense that no matter how fast they act, it's prudent. There's no downside. I don't see any downside in the changes that we've done. They've cleared up a lot of the language. They've put a lot of substance around most of it. There was some ambiguity around a couple of the terms, but I think if we put it in place, we're in a better spot than we were just leaving it alone and not doing anything, because something like this will pop up sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Yes, Heather.
The other thing is, we have people that are doing this already, and we're not looking at it at all. So it would probably be helpful to get it through before wedding season starts, so that these property owners are able to plan appropriately and get all their approvals taken care of that they're going to need.
So you'll have young
Before wedding
brides, you'll have
season.
brides calling the planning department
Right.
tomorrow. That's Heather Shank, S-H-A-N-K. Right under the bus, both wheels, both sets of wheels, right under the bus. What's our next step? We need to talk about it anymore, or do we need to make a motion to grant again, do we want to change the language? Are we comfortable with the language as it's written, or do we want to take out that sentence that Heather had recommended changing under that last paragraph? Or what do we want to do?
I recommend just putting maybe a modifier in the definition to say that operate as a business where the activities are not primarily conducted within a building or something like that, so that it's clear that you want them to have outdoor recreational activities, but it doesn't preclude use of a building.
You comfortable with that? You guys comfortable
okay with
making
that.
that?
I think primarily would be a good,
It's a good nondescript, vague word that we could use to give you a little bit of leeway. No, it's right.
but it does
now you've
clarify a little
got-
bit, because we're not intending to.
Right,
yeah.
and again,
I actually struggled with that a little bit when I was writing it, so that's a good way to, I think, define it.
Okay. Yes.
Just a question.
Beth?
So you all have a red line version. Do I
Yep.
need to read those changes out for anybody in the public that saw what was posted online, or?
So these red line changes have not been posted
No,
online?
these are new.
We could do one.
I could just summarize
Can you
what-
summarize them quick for us?
Sure, under section 328-5-13, under permit requirements, bit of an oversight when we wrote this, that outdoor recreation facilities are already permitted in the OFP and OCP districts, so we just added that clarifying language that those uses are permitted by right instead of saying conditional use permit. And then under that same section B4, we added in previously it said that all utilities needed to be placed underground, but we added that all, clarify that if they already exist, they don't have to bury them. So if they're already existing running non-municipal utilities, those do not have to be buried underground. And then under the next page, under paragraph E.
4E.
Or E1, just sort of, just clarifying that planning board may require submission of a traffic study. That's just some rewording. So that. And then under paragraph 2, the next section, regarding the noise, added in unreasonably audible and edited it used to say auditable, but it should be audible.
Auditable?
Auditable, audible.
Glad you caught that.
And then we add, what's that?
I'm glad you caught that.
And then we added in the planning board may further limit hours of operation and noise levels. And we're just trying to go a little bit beyond what our noise ordinance is. This is to protect neighbors so that there's not a wedding every weekend till 2 o'clock in the morning. So that sort of adds that in there. And that's it.
And a little bit of leeway on ours as far as planning board.
The city ordinance, like.
Planning board may
10 or
further.
11? 11?
Yeah, the noise.
No,
Yeah,
10
11, I
o'clock?
believe.
I think it's 11 o'clock. So this allows the planning board with input from abutters to add additional restrictions on that.
Okay. So discussion-wise, I think we're good. Any member of the audience wish to address this application? You're the only member, so no? Shaking his head, no. You can stay, okay, Craig, thank you very much. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing and address any other concerns from the board or from staff. And we'll entertain a motion if that is part of our purview here. Hang on just a sec, let me get to my report. Oy. Recommendations, so we just need to make a recommendation to push this draft ordinance through, right?
Correct.
How would you like that to read? I'm not going to read all that. Do I have to read all that? Section 24-2, allowable principal yada, yada, yada. Or can we make a motion to recommend this change to City Council to amend the zoning ordinance as outlined in the recommendation that you've so eloquently prepared in our
Or
report?
you could just say as presented.
As presented. So we'll entertain a motion to recommend City Council amend the zoning ordinance as outlined in the presentation and the packet of info that you got. How's that? Somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion, but with the addition of the language in section 4. That is, activities.
Primarily.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
let staff work up the language.
yeah, that are not primarily conducted within the building.
Okay, somebody like to second that motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
They-
Nope. That motion carries. Okay, let's move on here to the next section. What do we got, Heather?
The rules and procedures of the planning board had been updated since 2010. And after some discussion with the city solicitor and just issues that we were having with the rules and procedures, the city solicitor suggested that we revise it, and he gave us some prototypical language from City of Dover. And so we basically update our rules and procedures to make it more clear, bring it up more up to date with what we are actually doing today, and make it more clear how certain items should be handled. So what you have before you is the revised version of the rules and procedures, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. There's a whole lot of stuff that was added, and some language that was just simplified. I apologize that I didn't give you a track changes version, because I actually made a mistake during my revisions and accepted them and didn't save it, and so I apologize. I do have a version that, if you would like to see what some of the changes look like, I can pass it around.
I note here that a conflict of interest is defined as having a pecuniary interest in a matter or being in a butter.
Yes.
Not being a friend?
Duly noted.
Not being a friend.
Good friend, though. That promises support, so that's different.
No, it tells you what to do.
Tells you what to do.
People tell me what to do all the time, doesn't mean I have to.
And there is
That's why
an
you're
item,
married.
there is an item specifically in here that I wanted to talk about, which is reconsideration. So we had discussion last week, which prompted some of this regarding reconsideration of a vote or reconsideration of approval or disapproval of an application for good cause, provided it is within the statutory appeal period upon successful passage of the motion. So is that addressed here? Should we address that here, or should we push that into another item?
That's next on the
That's
agenda.
next. Oh, sorry, I didn't read far enough.
That's okay.
So any other comments regarding this procedural piece, Byron?
I think this is
It's excellent.
really
Yeah.
excellent,
Good step.
a step in the right direction. Establishing the Robert's Rules of Orders is the governing document, the governing rules that we use, and setting these procedures really is a great step forward in making this what is already, I think, an orderly process, a much more orderly and easily understood process for all of us.
Make sure we're doing it right.
Yeah, for the public and for the members of the planning board.
So that's just a procedural update. We don't need to do anything with that, right, Heather?
You can make a motion to accept, yeah, I think
To
you
accept
do have
those-
to make a motion.
Make a motion
as
to
body
accept those rules.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Heartily.
Indeed.
And I'll second it.
That motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That brings us to 9C.
Yes, and Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion for, having voted on the prevailing side, I would like to make a motion for reconsideration of our vote on the Public Capital Facilities Impact Fee Ordinance.
Right, so we addressed this article in our January meeting, and we've got a substantial different board here, and I am concerned that a reconsideration vote at this point might not be the best course. I'm wondering if we do a reconsideration, bring it back, address it with the group that's here, and re-vote on it. I'm a little.
There's no requirement that the same people be present.
Okay.
And,
Right. So the
I think
reconsideration
that
doesn't change the.
You could have the discussion, and after the
Does it-
discussion, if you still feel that it's inappropriate.
So
maybe I
does
would-
it, my concern is it changes the outcome of the ordinance change? Is that right, Heather, Lisa?
sorry.
Does it change the outcome of the,
It's a 2/3 majority vote that has to.
okay, and
Vote
it
to
was voted,
reconsider or vote
it
to
was
vote
voted.
And the motion needs to be made and seconded by someone in the prevailing side.
Okay, so the prevailing side was the yeas on that particular issue?
Yes.
So it was 5-3?
4-3.
4-3.
I think.
So a change in, that would,
Different people here, does that?
There are different people here.
and it would change the outcome. That's my concern. My concern is we almost pull it back, readdress it, re-vote on it. Go ahead, sorry.
I would suggest that in most parliamentary bodies, let's say we were the New Hampshire House of Representatives, it's quite probable that the composition of the body
Changes.
would be different.
Yep.
You know, as a person who's voting, asking for reconsideration, it's quite possible that my motion will fail.
Sure.
And so, you know, I think that it's, while I understand your sensitivity to it, I think that in parliamentary terms, I suspect that it is inconsequential.
Absolutely, okay.
It was noticed.
So it was noticed. So we had a reconsideration recommendation. So you've made made a motion. Would somebody like to second that motion for
Does it have to be
reconsideration?
someone who's on the prevailing side?
Yes.
To second?
That I don't know.
I'll second it, and then it takes it away.
That takes it away, right? Okay, so that motion for reconsideration from a yea to a nay, right? Correct? Has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries for reconsideration, so that's correct. So we're structurally good. All right.
I would like to move for reconsideration because on reflection and in discussing this with, you know, subsequently with other members who were present at the time, that I am concerned about the impact of increasing the fees at this juncture, at a time when I think we are trying to encourage development in the city. And I would not, you know, I don't know that the revenue considerations outweigh our interest in encouraging development, so.
Okay. Duly noted. Okay, that brings us to other business.
You need to motion that now?
You have to vote, I thought we voted on it.
Well, no, we voted to reconsider.
Reconsider, so now we have
Now
to.
you need to vote to approve it.
Now we
or
need to
deny
vote
it.
to approve or deny it.
There
So
may be other.
and again, this is catching a couple of you new. Could we just get an update from staff? John, put you on the spot. Is this your, oh, go ahead, Heather.
So annually, staff calculates the inflationary adjustment for the variable rate for the impact fees. And so we recommend that the impact fees be increased in accordance with the inflationary rate because these fees that are collected are used to offset the costs of infrastructure and recreation needs as the cost of construction for infrastructure for either transportation or recreation infrastructure are accrued. So staff generally recommends that the fees be adjusted for inflation, and that's what we recommended at last month's meeting. And that's, if there's any other questions about it. So the recommendation covers everything that's currently in the impact fee ordinance. So even though council approved an automatic waiver for non-residential impact fees, it's still in the ordinance in the event that they want to bring it back at some point. And so even though those fees are automatically not applied, we continue to update them based on the inflationary rate. But really all that would actually affect is the residential transportation impact fee and the residential recreation impact fee.
And it would affect it by not requiring it.
No, it pushes it up.
By not recommending the inflationary increase. So the impact fees would still apply. We just would not be recommending that they be increased
automatically
in accordance with the inflationary adjustment.
The current fees would remain
just
on
this
the
year.
books.
Correct.
Just this year.
Correct. Yeah.
But you would revisit it every year.
Correct.
because if I may speak, may I say something?
Yes.
You had an 8% fee in the transportation and a 4% on the recreation. I voted no, and I will continue to vote no, because to me, I agree with you. We're trying to promote economic development, and we've got looking for housing, and particularly affordable housing. I think the current fees are just fine.
Okay, so we have, sorry, I missed that before. We have before us the ordinance as outlined. Would anybody like to make a motion in favor? It's Kara, I'm sorry.
I have a question,
Yes.
please. So can you explain what those recreational facility impact fees pay? What do they contribute toward?
So impact, there's a very specific things that can be covered by impact fees, and they cover increased capacity. So for instance, the new recreational center in the Heights, that qualifies for to be used for the impact fees. If, for instance, a gym needed new floor replacement, that would not qualify for the impact fee because it's more of a maintenance issue. So it's anything that pertains to an increased capacity, a need for an increased capacity.
And the budget is based on the current fee at this point. It's not going to put people in a bind where they don't have the increase that they anticipated. I mean, what's the history of the increases?
It hasn't upgraded since 2015, I don't think.
Yeah, it's been a while. It might be even further back than that. I'd have to check the report. But they, so when they're doing their budgets, they just kind of look to that as a, I can't speak for every project, but I don't think that projects are necessarily scoped based on what's in there. It's just they'll scope their project, and then whatever's in there, they'll use it if they can towards whatever pieces of the project they can use it for. So I think the answer to your question would be no. I don't know that it would discourage certain things from happening based on the inflationary increase.
That money would just have to come from somewhere else.
Correct.
So as an example, Rollins Park. An improvement, I know they took down a lot of trees. Like an improvement would be building a music pavilion, and the funds from the recreational impact fee would go towards that.
Yeah, I'm not clear on everything that would and would not qualify. It's sort of a fine distinction that I would either refer to the folks that are used to doing that in their department, in that department, in Parks and Rec, you know, David Gill or legal. But I'm sure they have normal sort of regular standards that they use for determining. But yeah, if it's a new facility that's needed because of increased capacity, like the Canterbury Heights Rec Center is kind of a clear example of a need for increased capacity. So if they were to add facilities, I'd say Terrell Park would probably also be an example of an increased capacity. Rollins Park, you know, they cut down a bunch of trees, they're putting in a bunch of trees, and that might be considered more of a maintenance because of environmental.
Remediation stuff, but if it was like a pavilion or something.
You know, but adding the pavilions, that, you know,
Or
so
adding
there may be
another park.
elements in there that would qualify and elements in there that wouldn't.
And if I just want to ask a question. So if there is a facility that's going to be built, a new pavilion at Rollins Park, you know it well enough in advance you could increase the fees at any time? Do they have to be increased? I thought you reviewed them annually.
Correct.
So you would review them in 19, or could you review them, let's just say for some reason they decided to do a pavilion, could you review them and decide in September you wanted to increase the fees?
I don't believe there's anything in the ordinance that prohibits that. I think it suggests annually just to make sure we're doing it.
Right, that you're looking at it.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Am I correct in my understanding that we're making a recommendation to City Council?
Yes.
And so whatever our recommendation is, City Council will take it and either you know, agree with it or disagree with it.
So since 2005, there has not been an increase?
No, I
I
don't
would
think it's
have
that
to
long.
check.
15, I think. 15 there was increase.
There was an
It
increase.
said, well, that's what it said in here.
I think we've recommended increases, but the council has not adopted those. Is that correct?
Correct. So yes, I think
it's
for
gonna have to-
recreation,
Go for highway, July 2015.
so I think for recreation it's July 2014, and for transportation, it appears to be July 2015. Because there's different indices that are used to come up with the numbers.
So the impact might be that a project that would otherwise be developed, they would either have to raise the money otherwise, which would be potentially increase property taxes or what have you, or they wouldn't build. They wouldn't do the new project.
It's unclear to me the extent, how large of a numbers we're talking about here. I mean, remember, this is based on new development. So if you're in an area where there has been no development, whether or not the inflationary adjustment has occurred or not is not necessarily going to, affect whether a project gets done. So, for instance, well, that's not a good example. I was going to say in the Heights, it's mostly built out, but then we had Cobblestone, which I believe is in that district, so that probably contributed to it. But it may be a marginal amount, but over time, those types of things can build up.
Well, they build up, but they also compound on top of themselves, right?
That's what I mean.
So they on top of transportation and recreation, you've got all the other impact fees that are, some of them are still there and some of them are gone. I mean, non-residential is just, again, it's a cumbersome issue, but I think it's an issue that's we defer to city council, but we want to make sure we defer it appropriately. Are we asking for something out of the ordinary? Again, notwithstanding the fact that the city council wants to, economic development, and I mean, there's a certain point where we want it to be appropriate. Heather? I
think part of the logic of maybe not increasing the fees, it may be that, sort of address your point, to the city it may be a marginal amount. So okay, maybe it's $100,000 less, but in a $4.5 million project, that $100,000 may have made a big influence to a residential developer, or a residential developer may have significantly impacted a residential developer, where to the city, yeah, we've got to find that $100,000 someplace else, but we've also got to find, $4.49 million.
And that housing project may be generating, a property tax revenue for us.
Correct. So there's
that offsets.
Usually when there's a really robust market is when you want to take advantage of collecting those types of impact fees.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? So we can re-vote, or we will vote on this as a new item. So before us is the change statute, is that right? The changed amendment?
Well, it's really whether or not you recommend that council increase the inflationary, increase the variable rate in accordance with the inflationary rate.
Right. So anybody on the yay side of that like to make a motion to push that up to city council for consideration?
Your question was, we've already considered talking about it. Now the question is, should we recommend that there be no change?
Correct.
Should we recommend there be no change? So we could change the way I just worded that, which would probably be appropriate.
We're going to bring it to them one way or
It's not that we're not going to recommend it, it's that we're going to recommend that no change be made.
May I
So
help you out, Mr. Chairman?
would you please?
May I make a motion that we, may I make a motion that we not recommend a change? Blah, 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 at this time.
Second.
With the blah, 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 blah.
Blah, 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 blah.
A change in the...
Motion's
Public capital facilities.
So leave it as it is. Leave it as it is, keep the status quo. So motion was made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. 2 nays.
3 nays. Okay. Just one and
4 names.
4?
Oh, no, nay, and I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. You got me.
I'm sorry.
I'm voting nay, just like I did before. I'm voting not to do this. So yes, I'm voting yes that we want to
Clarify. You lost me.
Do you want to take a handcuff?
No,
Mr.
no,
Chairman?
that we don't want to change it. I apologize because I had
the
voted
nay?
nay last time.
What's the nay vote?
Status quo.
Status quo. Yay vote.
No
Yay
increase.
vote is to increase.
No.
was
The
his
motion
motion.
was not to recommend an increase.
So a yay vote is to stay the same.
Is to say the same. So a yay vote is not to increase, nay vote is to increase.
Recommend the increase. We're making a recommendation.
I apologize. It's been a long day.
So
Okay,
can I
so
get
let's
that?
take that again. So that
please?
motion's been made and seconded. So all those in favor of not recommending an increase, please signify by saying yay.
Yay.
All those in favor of recommending an increase, please say nay.
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 Okay,
3-3.
3-3. And I will vote
Chair.
yay.
Nay?
Yay. Yes, I will vote yes.
So, no increase.
So
You're
we'll
voting-
recommend no increase. Gosh.
Yes, we have no
That was
bananas.
very confusing. Thank you
sorry.
for helping try to
Well,
clarify.
I feel responsible. I apologize.
I know,
could do this
I-
for another half hour.
I know.
More responsible.
Mr. Chairman.
Own it.
Okay,
Just
we
as a
good?
follow-up to that.
Lisa?
Yes,
You
sir.
tell me if we're not, so
We are
we're
fine.
good,
Don't
okay.
tell me we're going to vote again.
John wants to vote.
I don't want to
Parliamentary change.
reconsider a vote.
No.
Part of the issue I have is I feel like I don't have all the information in terms of what the impacts are. I mean, it's sort of, we were put in this role of making some recommendations.
To
And
these-
the city council obviously has the full benefit of knowing,
Yeah.
I mean, because the revenue for some projects probably have to come from somewhere or the projects don't get done. At some point, it'd be nice just to have some sense of, from administration, is how important are these fees?
That's a good
So if we make it just a decision, I mean, it's not a big increase, but there's an increase, and I know some of the logic was not to have a big increase when it does happen. So not to sort of pass.
Have a
an
small little
And
increase.
then all of a sudden you get a 25% increase because you want to catch up. And so at some point, it'd be nice just to have that information, so, I mean, we aren't making the final decisions, but just to be a little more informed, so when we do make that decision, but, again, we got a year to do that.
It's a great point. It's a good point, John. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Item 10, we're almost done here. Got a couple quick updates. Get an update on the Main Street Guide.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that the presentation to council went really well, and I got a lot of positive feedback in terms of the final product. Several members expressed support for doing some type of regulatory, making some type of regulatory changes, but they also emphasized the need for flexibility. A few other people expressed that they weren't in support, or they emphasized the need for flexibility more than their support for regulatory changes. So there was support for doing a public meeting, and so I'd like to coordinate with Chairman Woodfin and trying to get the Main Street business owners to a meeting and presenting the document and talking about some of the changes that were proposed. I've also been talking with the city solicitor's office about what a proposed regulatory change might look like, and I think we're coming up with a good solution, which is sort of, it makes a general recommendation for a change in the city code, and then basically puts some of the other regulatory recommendations that we had made into the application. So in other words, it gives flexibility to staff. So the application might say, you need a permit, and this is how much it is, and this, but it doesn't become something that's statutorily in the code. So I thought that was a good solution, and we'll see, we'll suggest that, we'll bring it back to council and see how they feel about that, of course, after we have the public meeting and see how that goes. So that was a positive, I felt.
Are we shooting for a time frame on the public meeting to get stakeholders and the downtown?
I would like to do something in the next month.
Okay.
Just so it doesn't, probably going to get pretty busy with some of the products being sent to us from the form-based code, from Code Studio.
Okay.
So I'd like to just wrap that up before we get real busy with the
So
zoning update work.
before mid-March. Okay.
Mhm.
Any questions from the board regarding the update on the Main Street Guide? So we'll keep plugging away and hopefully have some updates on that. Let's move on to form-based code update.
So the visit went really, really well. I just wanted to share that. The consultants learned a whole lot about the city and the regulatory process. I don't know that it was very clear from each group that they interviewed, but from their perspective, they got a lot of information, and they heard a lot of things consistently over and over again, so that was helpful for them. Unfortunately, the snow kept a lot of people away from the kickoff meeting, but the kickoff, it was a really good presentation in terms of explaining what is form-based code and why are we doing this and what does it look like. So We do have a project website, which is concordnext.info. And I sent the email out to everybody with links to the video. And I encourage you all to watch the video if you haven't already. It's about 30 minutes. I thought it was helpful. A lot of people who went to these interviews didn't have the benefit of that presentation. So it may not have been as clear to people why they were there, but after you watch the video, I think it becomes more clear what it's all about. So they're going to be sending us a number of documents over the next few months, and hopefully in mid-May we'll start to schedule another public meeting. But I look forward to seeing what they come up with.
Great. Well, I know it was difficult getting all these stakeholders together, so good job getting everybody wrangled around. I don't know if anybody had a chance to go, but they were very good. I enjoyed talking to them. So, okay, let's get a quick Energy Committee meeting summary.
Yeah, so staff met with the Sustainability, Energy and Environment Subcommittee, just to try to coordinate with them because a number of their goals sort of overlap with our master plan. So we wanted to understand more about what their goals are right now and what it is they're hoping to accomplish, and also find out from them the degree to which we can coordinate with them on the update to the master plan that we're going to be doing in the next 2 years, and what their scope is and how it may overlap with our scope for the master plan. We also encouraged a meeting with them and the Conservation Commission to discuss alternative energy in the RO district, specifically solar panels. We had a really good discussion about that. Do you have anything to add or want to share?
Sure.
What we got out of it?
Well, just to add, in case people aren't aware of what they presented at the council meeting, was to an initiative for Concord, not just the city, but all residents to be 100% renewable by 2030? 2050? I think the city by 2030 and all residents by 2050.
For heating.
For thermal.
Thermal.
So it's a pretty ambitious goal. And it doesn't necessarily jive with our ordinance or our master plan or other initiatives that are going on in the city. So we reached out to them, and the mayor at the council meeting sort of asked them to meet with planning staff to sort of start discussing how do we get there. And so one of the things we're going to look at is doing potential study for solar sites within the city, because right now, Councilor Kretovic brought up an interesting point during their talk about the West Portsmouth Street solar array and the appropriateness of that. I think it's about 54 acres of solar panels in the RO district. And I think that got tabled with the ZBA. But either hiring an intern or somebody doing a project that looks at the whole city and starts to identify areas. We don't want to keep running up against this and saying, no, you can't do this here, this is not the best location, but sort of offer places and alternatives for these large-scale solar projects that can feed into the renewable energy goals. So hopefully that's something that can happen in collaboration with that group over the next year or so.
We were essentially also just trying to raise their awareness that while everybody loves the concept of alternative energy and solar, that there may be conflicting values about the residential open space district and about what the land should be used for. And so I think that was a helpful conversation to realize that different groups may have different opinions about what's appropriate out there, and we need to have a community-wide discussion about that. And they mentioned, well, there's certain places that are more appropriate for this X, Y, and Z reason, and we said, well, that's why we want to have this study to sort of identify where it would be appropriate and see if those things can be, more compatibly combined in some way. So it was really helpful.
Great. Any questions? I know it's going to be coming up more and more, and we've seen it only in a few little small cases with the place on Pleasant Street that comes to mind, but we'll have others that'll be before us, so we want to get some guidance and some things in place. Okay, so that brings us to item 13, which is any other items that may legally come before the board. I don't believe there are any, correct?
No.
So nothing else on the agenda, so we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and roundly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.